Good evening, everyone. I'm Sue Hodgen, the chair of the Southport's Planning Board. It is 6 p.m., and I'm going to call our February 2025 regular meeting to order. Please ask that everyone silence or turn off their cell phones. We'll start, as we always do, by those that can and will. Please stand while we have an invocation and offer our allegiance to country and flag. Will you do our invocation for us, please? Thank you.
Our beloved Father in heaven, we are so very grateful that we could come here tonight and tend to the business of this portion of thy kingdom, Southport, that you will grant us the wisdom to make the right decisions in all things that we do, and that it will better beautify this part as well. Again, we ask thee for thy blessings, and ask a blessing upon all those who travel, that when they do so, they'll travel home in safety. And we, as always, ask these favors and blessings in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
All right, thanks so much. We will move on with our agenda. Item D is approval of the January 16th meeting minutes. You all received a copy of these in advance, and I understand that we've got a corrected copy in front of us from some corrections that were made. Has everyone had a chance to look through those? Are there any other corrections to be made?
I have one minor one on item G, the selection of the chair. I nominated Ms. Sue Hodgen, and then it says I seconded the nomination, and I believe it was Kevin that may have seconded. Does that sound right?
I appreciate the support twice, but I do believe that was not correct. Kevin, that was Mr. Lachlan. Tori, if we can get that corrected, please, that'd be great. Appreciate that. Any other corrections to be made? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to approve the January minutes with those corrections?
So moved.
Thank you, Will, and a second? Thank you. Appreciate that, Larry. Motion is on the floor. Any final discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen. Item E is the approval of our agenda for tonight. Members were issued this in advance of our meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to it? Do I hear a motion then to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Will, and a second? Larry, appreciate that. Motion is on the floor. Any final discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Item F is public comment. Do I hear a motion, please, to move into the public comment period?
So moved.
Thank you, Will. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Bob. Motion is on the floor. Any final discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion again passes unanimously. Madam Deputy Clerk, or is there anyone signed up to speak?
No, Madam Chair, there's not.
Thank you. Anybody submitted anything by email?
No, ma'am, I have nothing.
Anyone in attendance that would like to speak but did not sign up? Motion to end public comment then, please, gentlemen.
So moved.
Thank you. Will, in a second?
Second.
Thank you. Fred, any final discussion to the motion on the floor? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, sir. Item G, at this time, I'm going to ask for a motion to move into closed session pursuant to allowances in North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11. Item 3 of that statute section allows closed session, quote, "to consult with an attorney employed or retained by the public body in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorney and the public body, which privilege is hereby acknowledged." Do I hear a motion, please, that we go into closed session?
So moved.
Thank you, Will. And a second? Second. Thank you, Larry. Motion is on the floor. Any final discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We are suspended for closed session. We will move to a back room. I understand y'all wouldn't be in favor of going out and standing on the porch while we're doing this, so we're going to take care of you in that vein. We'll be back. Closed session. All right, gentlemen, do I hear a motion to move out of closed session for resumption of open session?
So moved.
Thank you, Will. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Larry. There is a motion on the floor. Any final discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We are once again in open session at 6:56. On to item H, old business. Our first item is 101 East Moore Street, major site plan. Ms. Meehan, you're up. This is on pages 17 to 71 of your packets, gentlemen.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Planning Board. This is a major site plan application for a mixed-use project located at 101 East Moore Street. This is a request that has been continued from your January regular meeting. The subject property is zoned Central Business District. The dimensional requirements for that district, there are no setback requirements, there are no minimum lot sizes, and the height limit at the time of application was 40 feet. And per State Statutes 160D 108, when an application is submitted and a rule or amendment is made, the applicant has the ability to choose which adopted version of the rule they would like to use. So this applicant would like to continue to use the 40-foot height that they had when they applied for the project itself. So this is just the current conditions of the area and an aerial showing you at the corner of North Howe and East Moore Street. The project is a 3-story mixed-use building. The existing retail is on the first floor, and then there will be 2 floors of residential with 4 units total and 2 for each floor. This is the submitted application or site plan rather, I apologize, that was submitted in April that shows the 4 parking spaces needed for each one of the residential units for the mixed-use project. There are no parking spaces required for the retail commercial property that exists there. At your last meeting, the applicant had proposed an alternate parking configuration that required a variance from the parking requirements. That variance was denied at the last Board of Adjustment meeting, so they would like to continue forward with this site plan that shows the reversing out of the parking lot onto North Howe Street. I'm not going to go too far into a presentation. I know I went into a lengthier presentation last time, but just wanted to state that the site plan includes all of the required elements for a major site plan with the variance that was granted in 2024 for this project. I know that the Planning Board Review Committee did meet on this on February 14th, and I will allow the committee to present their findings at that time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. And the applicant is here if you have any questions, and they have a presentation, or they can show some slides if you have any further questions as well.
So would the applicant like to make comments now or a presentation?
Thank you, and thank Ms. Mahan for her presentation and staff report. A lot of what we have, excuse me, is already been gone over, but wanted to make sure that you did have that information. So again, this is the subject site. As Ms. Mahan said, we are compliant with all sections of the zoning code, and the UDO says that if the site plan otherwise meets all standards of the ordinance, the planning board shall approve such. We did speak a little bit last time about the different types of approvals. This is administrative with objective standards and very little discretion. This is from the School of Government website. Again, just current conditions. The area of the site plan, this is where the parking would be added, and as Ms. Meehan said, as long as it's within 400 feet of the property, that's compliant under code. Some illustrative renderings, just because I know there had been some questions about the height, and was it over the other building or just over the commercial? So again, just to show that it will only be over the commercial section, the Bullfrog Corner front section. Some floor plans, these are also in your packet if you have any specific questions about that. I did want to note, we do have some new board members. This is just step one of any planning process, is the zoning approval. Any actual site plan would have to go through full TRC, get all building permits, and meet all requirements for things like fire ingress and egress and sprinklers and whatever those requirements are. And that will all be reviewed by the appropriate reviewing agencies. And with that, we are here as well for any questions if there's anything for the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. What, excuse me, what questions do members have for either staff or the applicant at this point?
Through the chair. So, Mo, could you bring back up the parking layout, please?
Yes.
So it'll be, if I see it correctly, and what confused me a little bit is we had in our package, or in our packages, I've seen a couple of different plans going from 25 August 22, 16 November 22, 21 December 22, 17 April 24, and 5 November 24. So what's the date of this one?
This is April 17th of 2024, and that would be found on.
So that's the current one?
Yes,
That's the
sir.
one that we're going to be acting on?
Yes, there were several different reiterations of the parking that were taking place throughout the history of the
Okay.
project.
So what's that page number, Mo,
That
that
would
this
be,
one is
in
on?
your packet, that's going to be page 19. You're welcome.
Okay. So, bear with me, some of this, and Madam Chair, I would also, I want to really start off and say thank you for giving us a month. As a new member, I had a lot of questions of staff, and this gave me some time to really go through, so I'm not just shooting from the hip for the applicant and not knowing what I'm talking about. And, I want to make sure that we're doing everything fairly and above board, and also following our UDO, as it was at the time. So, if I understand this correctly, this application was done 8/29/22, correct?
That's
This is
correct.
the original one?
Yes, that's correct.
And then at the time, they were looking for four two-bedroom, 1,000-square-foot apartments, with the first floor being retail, the second and third floors to be built over retail, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay. So since then, the UDO was changed, and the UDO changed in September, about a week later, right? So it's a little bit different now?
Yes, right now, the height for the central business district or the business district is 30 feet.
Okay. So the fact that the applicant was able to bring this in before that change, that means we're working under the old UDO then?
Correct.
Okay. And so did the height change, did the parking requirements change?
They did not, no.
Okay, all right. So you've also gone through, and I've tried to put together a timeline, because where we started off in August of '22, there's been some different things brought in, and I wanted to make sure I understood it all, and I saw that through December of '22 and '23, there was reviews by the planning board that went out, asked about parking, so that brought in changes to the parking because they couldn't turn around, so that's, I assume, is what's resulted here.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So and it also wound up along the way, make sure I've got this right. So in January of '24, and this is what changed, so they wound up with a variance through the Board of Adjustment.
Correct.
So that doesn't have to come through us first, so there's nothing that's been denied or nothing that's been approved, but the applicant's allowed to just go out and go to the Board of Adjustment if they don't like the UDO, regardless of whether it's been through the planning board or not.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, all right. Something we should probably work on.
Well, the variance procedure is there for these types of issues to come forward, and an
Yeah.
applicant has the right to go to the Board of Adjustment for those requests.
Yeah, and I think what confused me is that the fact that there's been, I think, 5 different site plans with different types of parking. There've been 2 requests for variances. One was approved, one was declined. The one that was declined was to be able to do 100% on-street parking. So, let me make sure I've got this all right. So we're working off the 17 April 24 plan. So the parking space, just so I understand, if I go through the current UDO, it states that for the purpose of the ordinance, an off-street parking space shall consist of space adequate for parking an automobile with room for opening doors on both sides, together with properly related access to a public street or alleyway and maneuvering room. No required off-street parking shall be located on any public right-of-way. So it appears that based on this plan, that they have the ability to open the doors, they have the ability to access the parking spaces. There's 3 regular spaces plus a 4th for handicap.
Correct.
Okay. So outside of a parking lot, when we do, and again, some of this is education on my part, so please bear with me, and certainly all through the chair, does a parking lot require a marked entrance or exit at all?
It does
Directional?
not, no.
Okay. So you don't need any kind of a direction or anything for the public that's saying this is a parking lot, or?
No, not, let's say I'm going to a new parcel of land.
I
No,
see.
there does not need to be.
Okay.
No.
All right, fair enough. Does it have to be paved?
Only if you are over 10 spaces.
Okay. So you don't have to worry about drainage or anything else like that?
That's correct.
So how do you know, so the only way that it's a handicap notification would really be a placard on the wall?
Yes, and with the ADA requirements that I listed in the packet itself, it does not need to be, it just has to be the right dimensions, and has to provide the ability for a van to move in and have the space that is built to the specifications for the entrance and exit of the
Okay.
person.
So, so you don't have to have any kind of signage that's saying this is handicap? It just,
That's correct.
so how do you, I'll try not to get too deep into it, but how do you, if you don't have to have paving and you don't have to have signage, how do people know where to park and how to park?
They can put the bollards in front.
Okay.
So they can have the stops, the
Like
curb stops. That's
Okay.
correct, yes.
All right, fair enough. That's a good idea on that one. So, one of the questions I had on this too is that I noticed that the variance for, well, let me stop there for a second. The property lines on 101 East Moore, it falls just behind the building, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Could you just show me on there where I'm looking at? I wanted to make sure I understand the property lines correctly.
That's
right.
the line.
So that's the rear of the property. So
That's
that-
correct.
So this application is for 101 East Moore.
Correct.
So the property that they're going to use for parking is actually belonging to the building behind them?
It's next door.
Next door.
114, yes.
Okay. And that came under the ability that you can use anything within 400 feet, even if you don't own it?
They own that piece of property. The same owner owns both pieces of property.
Okay, same question though. Does that mean an applicant could, if they didn't own that property, that they could still use it?
They could, if they had proper approvals by the
Okay.
neighbor.
All right. When like properties are next door to each other, do the property lines merge? So if the same owner owns the two of them, does the property line ever merge together so it becomes one big parcel?
It could, but this one does not. It does not have to.
Okay, so it's up to the applicant?
That's correct.
There isn't anything
Or
on
the
state
property
law?
owner, that's
Okay.
correct.
All right, yeah, by the property owner, thank you. Let's see. So in this, the fact that they own it, how do you make sure that you have long-term access to that parking? Let's say they decide they want to sell the property on Howe Street, North Howe. How do we make sure that that property is able to be used for this parking forever?
Well, we could ask them to get apologize. We could ask them to make sure that there is a restriction on the property,
Okay,
deed restriction, so that would be always running with that property, that the parking must go with that piece
okay.
of property.
All right, fair enough. And that could be forever type of,
That's correct, yes.
okay. Let's see. I think one of the other questions I had was, so when they went for the variance was for being able to back out of the spaces. But, and this is where I think was a little confusing to me. So the application is, for this building, is at 101 East Moore Street. So they're the applicant, and they're the ones that need the parking. But the variance that was requested was for the property on 114 North Howe Street. They have no role in this other than only commonality is the same owner.
Well, that's where the parking is located.
No, I understand that, but wouldn't the applicant who owns 101 East Moore, regardless of owning the other building, they're the ones that need the parking, wouldn't they have to file a variance for that parking to be able to back out of it?
There's no parking on that lot to back out of.
Right, and that's my point, that Building A, Building B, Building A is the application, Building B has the lot that holds the parking. So the variance is for Building B, but Building B has not filed any kind of application to do any kind of work on their building. So do you see what I'm getting at?
Yes. Yes, if you would like.
Actually, I'd rather have our attorney answer that, I think. Not that I don't want to hear from you, but you're not our attorney, so.
Yeah, so your concern is about whether Building A or Building B would have to have a variance itself.
That's correct.
In that instance.
Yeah.
I do think that it's the case, as they indicated, that the variance could be as to the building, where it was granted. I mean, it was granted for that same building that was identified on the variance application, and I think that that's the variance that would still be applicable in this situation because of what the parking does and does not require under the UDO. I don't think you would need a separate variance as it relates to the other building.
For 101.
Right.
Even though
101
101 needs the parking space.
Well, I don't think that the parking spaces are actually necessary in that. I mean,
Well, it's necessary
here-
for that for the project, but the UDO allows you to have parking within 400
Right,
feet.
right.
And on a separate property.
Right. That's the limitation, is that you can take advantage of a neighboring property for purposes of achieving your parking requirements.
It was just confusing to me because I would think that the application for 101 East Moore, they're the ones that need the parking. They would come in with an agreement beforehand saying, hey, we've got permission to use this. I haven't seen anything in our packages saying that they've received permission to use this, or that there's any kind of permanent easement or what have you. And then the application for the variance was for the other building, which has no role in this other than that they own the property.
Right. We do have the same owner in that situation for both buildings. And I think as far as the long-term concern, making sure that it follows with the property, Amy, we've talked about what the board can do here. I mean, there's other language in that same provision of the UDO which says that they can put conditions on an approval.
Okay.
And conditions that are not inconsistent with the current approvals that have been made. And so if there were to be a requirement that there would be a deed restriction included, that could be added to an approval through the board. That's an example of a condition that could be added to a situation like this. Just like, for example, I think too, requiring signage of some sort to identify that there is parking here. That wouldn't be inconsistent with any of the prior rulings, and it would be consistent with the language of the UDO saying that you can conditionally approve things. But I get how it's confusing in terms of how that applies, and perhaps it could have been the case that the application was tied initially to the other building per se, but it could be for either one in that instance.
All right. Super. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Madam Chair, that's all I have right at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. What other questions are there?
Question, Madam. So the site plan that we are looking at is the survey that's on the screen now, the April 2024. So, and I'm not too familiar with what the next step for the applicant would be, but is there a site plan that will be reviewed or approved by the city beyond what we're seeing here? Because this is a survey, it's marked as a survey, not as a site plan. Is there another plan that you would expect to see?
For all intents and purposes, this is considered a site plan for the site plan review itself to make sure that the project meets the dimensional requirements, the height requirements, and it's stated on the survey what those are. The applicant, once there is a decision, an affirmative decision, then they would have to come in with full building engineer drawings that have all of the requirements for the building code, for the fire code, and any other codes that are required will have to be submitted at the time of a building permit.
Thank you.
I was trying to find it in the UDO. It's right before table 3.3. There's a subdivision 11, and it says that, actually, wait a minute, where was that? Okay, 10. Where did that go? Where am I? Did I lose track of it already? Where's the 400-foot one? Hold on a second. Sorry, I lost track of it. I thought I was in the right place with it. Okay, so I'm sorry. It's D4 from, I'll give you the subdivision in a second, but it just says within any zoning district, if the off-street parking space required by the ordinance cannot be reasonably provided on the same lot on which the principal use is located, such space may be provided on any land within 400 feet of the main entrance to such principal use. So it could have been the case that the principal use property had been the subject of the application. That could have been the way that it was done, but for whatever reason, it was framed from the perspective of the other property, and then they used that exception to the general rule regarding minimum standards. So that's 3.14. 3.14 D4, just to be clear about it.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Other questions for staff or the applicant?
Sorry, I do have one more. So this is the plan that we're going to be acting on, correct?
Yes, sir.
So the variance, though, that was approved was for a different plan. How does that change things? The variance, that's the variance dated, that I think, if I understood this correctly, is 17 April 24, which is after the variance, which that plan was the 21 December 22 plan. So, yeah, 21 December 22, which had the cars up against the building, one against each building, two at the end of the lot. So how does that change with respect to the variance that's been granted versus what this application is now?
The The variance was from the provision to back out of the lot.
Okay.
Upon looking at this site plan further, the two parking spaces that were against the buildings did not meet the dimensional requirements of the parking spaces required and would not allow the doors to be opened. So the new site plan that is there has the correct dimensions and the correct width for the travel aisle.
But isn't that like changing boats in midstream? That if you're going in for an application for a variance, and this is the plan that you're submitting, this is what the Board of Adjustment is acting on, and yet the plan that we're acting on is an entirely different plan. So I'm sure that in the big picture, they're probably ideally the same, but I'm just trying to understand the process. How we can have 5 different ideas for parking, and I understand that some of them, the initial one, it didn't work. That was in that the turning around and took 30 different back and forths to turn around and things like that. But shouldn't this be consistent with what the Board of Adjustment approved and what we're acting on? And I don't mean this in an accusatory tone, and I'm sorry if it sounds that way, but I'm just trying to wrap my head around how this can change, how we could have 2 different variances, how we can have 5 different site plans, how this can take 2+ years, and somehow we're supposed to act on this, you know what I mean? It's like, there's a lot of changes here, and things being, going to the Board of Adjustment without the planning board even being aware of it, and having no role in it, or, yeah, so, it's just me trying to understand the process. So does that change anything with the Board of Adjustment versus what was applied for and what we're seeing tonight?
I would say no, that it does not, because it was not meeting the dimensional requirements that must be met for the UDO at the time that was considered. They were looking at the requirement of leaving, not necessarily the site plan itself for that. So as long as the site plan was within that area of the property, as well as meets the dimensional requirements and the conditions of the variance itself, then it would still meet the intent of the variance, or
So-
the relief that they received from the variance.
So could they actually submit a 6th site plan and reverse the angle of the parking against the back of Moore Street, and it would still fall under the Board of Adjustment variance?
I don't think it would work, to get in and out. I mean, just,
Yeah. I guess I'm just trying to understand, when does the state get driven and saying, all right, we want to act on this, stop doing this so we know what we're acting on?
well, that's when this one was submitted, and that's when it was like, this is it,
Okay.
this is where we're going.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Anyone else with questions or concerns? Okay, at this time, I'll ask, there were 3 review committee members. Either of the review committee members have any comments for this? Fred or Kevin?
So this issue has weighed heavily with me, and I know the other folks on the review committee and the primary concern is safety of citizens of Southport. With my heart, I cannot approve this. As a planning board member, I know that I have to. I just want to make that clear.
Okay. Madam Chairman, I agree with what Fred has said and also many of the points made by Mr. Ashley on how this whole process has occurred. I think this will open up the door for us and the city to look at the way processes are done in the future with regard to the exchange of information from the city planning office to the Board of Aldermen, more of an exchange with the liaison representative from the Board of Aldermen and information we have of anything pending. And those are things that aren't before us tonight, but will be looked at to hopefully improve the system for the citizens of Southport. I'm not saying that the applicant did anything incorrectly in this. I think he used the benefits of the system but the system allows it, and I think if we want to improve the system, we make changes to the system. And we'll act on this, but I think also we'll have subsequent new business dealing with proposed amendments, textual amendments to the UDO to cover some of the concerns in the future. I think if we indeed make a motion to approve this tonight, I think as part of that approval, we should note that the conditions of the installation of visual cues and signage for pedestrian safety was one of the conditions imposed by the variance. Make sure that's stated, and also if there's a condition, and we'll have to ask counsel for the applicant about this also, as far as condition of approval that the parking area owned by the Pearl will be available, in a sense, in perpetuity for the residents of Bullfrog. And we also thank the board for all their hard work, and Fred with the review committee, and also the patience of the applicant, and understanding that because of the way the system is, everything was done in good faith. Thank you.
And I have the concluding remarks for our committee. This review committee and the full board of late has been wrestling with this site plan submission for some time. As long as we felt that there might be a way forward to resolve some concerns we felt were not in Southport's best interest as a whole city, not for any singular applicant. Part of our responsibilities is to analyze submissions as to their look and feel in respect to keeping with the character of the town, something to which the town is committed in our comprehensive plan and the land use plan. Even now, as we're finalizing revisions to our comp plan, we've heard throughout the process from citizens reiterating why so many have moved here, for the small town character, the slow pace that makes them feel healthy and safe. While working to understand the full intent of this submission, the committee also learned that the city's processes, as we've discussed already regarding applications and the interaction around those between the planning and adjustments boards, have some flaws that simply must be addressed. Now, I understand that this is nothing new. Businesses and towns, for that matter, discover things no one thought would ever happen until they do. Something pokes them square in the posterior. And that's what we found ourselves faced with here. There's no need to go through the full details of this project submission. That's happened before. I believe it's recorded as a part of this board's August 15th, 2024 meeting. I've said it before and I'll say it again. City staff at the time of this submission in 2022 told this applicant that everything he needed for the application's receipt by the city was there. Obviously, that was not the case. Indeed, he submitted something for parking intentions, but it was not the parking required by the UDO and other applicable city ordinance, or we would not be at this point today. In fact, the application should not have been submitted to the planning board until that was resolved, but that didn't happen. The application was accepted and it was moved forward to this board. A review committee was established and in good faith, as Kevin says, began attempts to work with the applicant to make changes that would work for the good of the whole town. For the record, I want it known that our committee advanced every idea, every option it could conjure for best and required parking options for this submission. The applicant pursued and obtained for his benefit, as he is allowed by statute and the UDO, a formal adjustment which reconfigured a parking drawing, reducing the required spaces by one and allowing cars to back out into Southport's busiest intersection at Howe and Moore Streets. Our review committee believes that the city failed us in January and February 2024. Whether by staff, leadership, or council, by not giving proper advice regarding Board of Adjustment processes and then the appeal rights post-adjustment action. That window closed well before we ever learned that the city could have had legal representation at that January 2024 Board of Adjustments hearing to present evidence about the safety concerns that we, as a committee of this board, found to be glaring. I also wanted on record that our review committee, had we been well informed of the processes for that adjustments hearing and all of our appeal options within that 30-day window following, would have pressed full court for the city's appearance at that hearing, and we would have pressed to appeal that adjustment in the month following in the greater interest for all of Southport. None of that happened, however. The applicant appeared again at last month's Board of Adjustments meeting, asking for forgiveness for any parking requirements for his submitted project. This time, Adjustments denied the request, ending the applicant's available procedural options. Now, with that latest result, this applicant and council have already advised the city that if this board tables the matter for any other discussion, they will issue a writ of mandamus, forcing us to come back and approve his submission. So, a partial background given for the record and as an explanation of our options, or lack thereof, we basically find ourselves with our collective backs against the wall. Because of a process failure, I regret to inform for the committee that we have no way out. We are now forced to approve this major site plan. As we've discussed, we can put forth a motion to approve it with conditions. I'll ask at this point if there is a motion to be brought to the floor.
Madam Chairman, I make a motion that we move forward with the approval with the conditions as noted by the Board of Adjustments in the variance that was granted with regard to the installation of visual cues and signage for pedestrian safety, and also that there will be a condition that the parking will continue in perpetuity as far as that building is used for mixed use from the owner of the, I guess it's the Pearl property.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Will. There's a motion on the floor. Any final discussion? All in favor?
So I have a comment. So the perpetuity part, that would become a deed restriction, I believe, and as the condition.
For shared parking agreements and things like that, in the past, I've seen it done multiple ways. As a deed restriction, I've seen it done as a shared parking agreement or a parking agreement between the parties that gets recorded kind of like an easement. And I've seen it done simply as a condition on your site plan, and then it becomes a zoning violation if it's not done. So that would be up to the board. And typically the way that condition, if it's acceptable to the city, is that document, whatever that is, is negotiated by your city attorney so that you don't have to get into the exact details of the document.
Any other discussion?
Just very quickly, I agree. I think a deed restriction is probably the best way to go. I'm not an attorney, but I guess we'll have to leave it to the attorney.
Yeah, for purposes of clarity in the motion, if you're trying to get clarity as to the nature of that particular condition, I would suggest a deed restriction as opposed to just a condition on the approval itself, which, although Amy's right, that would be a violation in the future. It's just a lot clearer to the prospective buyers and into the future in the public records that it'd be part of the deed history. But she's right, you can do it in many ways, and you don't need to be worried about how we could achieve it. If that's the end goal, that it be a deed restriction, then we'll just make it happen.
Thank you, Ray. I believe that would, and Larry, does that answer your question for that?
It does, thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion on the floor and a second. Any final discussion? Excuse me.
Just for clarity, on the second part of that motion, under the conditions, could we just go over those again really quick? The latter.
I think based upon advice of counsel, I think what we'll say. Thank you, Sue. I think with regard to the second condition, is that there will be a deed restriction committing that area to parking for the usage by the Bullfrog Building, which is, and the address is 101 East Moore Street.
Good, Larry. Okay.
It does, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion as stated? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, gentlemen. The motion carries. We sincerely hope that the applicant looks to create more room in this small parking area, possibly by taking down the planter box attached to the Pearl Building to better facilitate possibly three-point parking. We discussed this so that as tenants enter the area, do a three-pointer and head back out front-facing to not be all but blindly backing out onto House Street. It's the applicant's choice, but this was an option that was discussed with staff. Whatever the outcome, the liability for the parking rests with the applicant. Our continuing concern is for the safety of Southport citizens and visitors, many of whom have small children, grandchildren, and/or pets that use that sidewalk, that area every single day. We sincerely hope that thoughtful plans within the constraints of Southport ordinance are employed to prevent in any and every way possible a terrible accident in this very busy part of our little town. Moving forward now to item 2. There's a special events text amendment found on pages 73 through 78 of your packages. Wendell, the agenda shows you as the lead for this item, sir.
That is correct. Thank you, Madam Chair. And good evening, and thank you, board members. Let me get my clicker out. Pardon me. All right. Good evening. This presentation is a proposal for a text amendment to the Unified Development Ordinance, wherein staff are seeking to create a new land use. Before I get into those details, I would like to provide some background information on how we arrived at this point. In the summer of 2024, an applicant was granted a special use permit for the purposes of operating a bed and breakfast. As required, the applicant brought forward a management plan. However, it included the B&B operating as a venue hosting weddings and other events. This proposal highlighted the fact that the UDO does not presently have appropriate land use for such an endeavor. At an October Planning Board session, a committee was formed consisting of staff and members of the board. While working, the committee made note of a couple of obstacles. One, what parameters should be put into place to ensure that the nature of a residential zoning district is not altered by higher impact activities such as a B&B's hosting of weddings and other specialized events. 2, how will safety precautions such as capacity limits be enforced? 3, how do we ensure that emergency services are not overwhelmed? What was determined was a proposal to create an accessory land use that can be administratively managed by planning staff. That use would be specialized events, which would be defined as being a commercial venture held in non-religious venues, wherein the event is secondary to the venue's primary land use. Article 8 of the UDO would need to be amended to reflect the creation of this definition, along with Table 3.1 of the UDO. With this proposal, Table 3.1 of the UDO would be amended with appropriate zoning district specialized events where permitted. It should be noted that the permitted districts mirror those of B&Bs. Also, you may notice that rather than being a land use permitted by right, this new accessory use would require specific use standards. In concert with the new accessory land use, a temporary use permit would need to be established. The utility of the permit is to ensure that all appropriate agencies, such as city fire and the like, would be aware of the proposed event and can establish capacity standards. This permit would otherwise operate similar to our current food truck permits. Other benefits of a temporary use permit include staff being able to administratively control the number of specialized events at any given time, the limit of the number of events hosted by any one specific establishment, and ensure that residential neighbors are considered. These specific use requirements for specialized events reflect the need to acquire the temporary use permit, as well as ensure that issues such as noise, signage, and alcohol consumption are managed appropriately. The occasions that are not considered specialized events are those that are non-commercial and or are already permitted and reviewed by a separate process, such as Southport's 4th of July Festival. This concludes my presentation. I can answer any questions regarding it or the staff report. Thank you.
Is there, this was a recapitulation of what we first saw last month, Wendell, is that correct?
That's correct, ma'am.
Excuse me.
Yes, ma'am.
So are there comments or questions from members for staff on this, or committee members?
Wendell, I know you answered this in an email, and it was about the admin having discretion to disapprove anything that seemed not consistent in a good way for the city, and you indicated no.
Yes, sir. I spoke with Director Meehan about that. Essentially, if an applicant provides us with an application and the permit, and they meet all our specific land use standards, they have to be awarded their permit or their ability to act it.
So if there were a satanical cult coming to town and they wanted to have a festival on a vacant lot and they checked all the boxes, there would be nothing that could stop it, correct?
Bad publicity, I imagine. Yeah. And this is not geared towards any religious activity. That's part of the specialized event.
Go ahead.
Wendell, just so I understand, we have the text amendments in number 5, as you've listed, you don't have it up. Could you pull up the 3.6 accessory use standards?
Yes, sir. Here we go.
Okay. So those are going to be included in what we're deciding upon tonight, correct?
Yes, sir. So the amendment's going to be found in a couple of different places in the UDO. The definitions under Article 8, Table 3.1, and 3.6. And then again, for the temporary use permit, I want to say that's going to be under, excuse me, I have it in here, 3.6A. So 3.6A along with 3.6Q.
Okay. Now, is there anything about capacity, the number of individuals?
That's part of why we're having a temporary use permit, so that fire can be a part of the review, and they can set capacity standards per case.
Okay.
And then to reiterate also why the temporary use permit is so that, as per the committee, we don't want a bed and breakfast that is adjacent to residential districts, to residential properties, having wedding venues every weekend. So the temporary use permit allows us to limit the amount of times within a given time frame those can be allowed.
But as part of that process, you'll analyze, based upon safety, the number of people, based upon even the certificate of occupancy. Like I know bed and breakfast can only have so many residents or guests at a weekend.
Yes, sir.
And based upon their land capacity, I guess we'll evaluate the whole scenario as to the exact capacity.
Yes, sir. That's something I spoke with the fire chief about, and they would be able to manage that.
All right.
Anything else? Hearing no other questions, then do I hear a motion to accept the committee's recommendation and staff's drafted text amendment for forwarding on to the Board of Aldermen for adoption into the UDO?
Madam Chairman, I make such a motion.
Thank you, Kevin. Is there a second?
Second.
Appreciate it. Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second. Any final discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? All right, since this is accepted, someone please needs to read the consistency statement on page 77 in your packets, please.
Thank you, Will.
I'll do it.
Go ahead.
You just want to hear my lack of Oz. Statement of consistency and recommendation. The City of Southport Planning Board hereby finds that the proposed zoning text amendment to the Unified Development Ordinance is consistent with the city's 2015 Camera Core Land Use Plan, originally adopted November 13th, 2014, and subsequently amended by the Southport Board of Aldermen. More specifically, the proposed amendment is consistent with Policy 7.8. Southport recognizes that tourism is important and will support activities that promote tourism. The Planning Board recommends that the Board of Aldermen approve the zoning text amendment.
Thank you, Larry. Appreciate that. All right, folks, moving on to new business. Number I is project updates and meetings. Wendell, you're up again.
Thank you. I hope you're not getting sick of me yet. I like it. Keep me on my toes. Yeah, okay. So essentially, there's just a couple of updates, nothing major, nothing that's coming down the pipe immediately for your guys' purview. We are talking about doing a UDO update. Essentially, we are looking through our UDO and looking at 160D and the other statutes that govern land use and making sure that there's no inconsistencies. That's something that we're working with over the course of the next 2 to 3 weeks. So, as far as meetings go, a draft of the 2026 and a draft of the 2026 to 2035 state transportation improvement plan is now up on the NCDOT's website. They're taking public comments. You just go to NCDOT, click on the STIP section, and you can make your comment there. And just to give you a rough idea, Turtle Bay has completed their tree removal portion of development. In the next couple of weeks, we'll have a pre-construction meeting with staff and the developers, along with Public Works. And that is that. Any questions?
At the Turtle Bay development, a lot of the trees that are left are very thin pines and such. Will they be thinning that out at all, or is that it?
That should be it, sir. The tree removal permit has already been processed, so.
Well, if they're unregulated trees, like if there's something like this big,
Sorry, I'm going to let Director Meehan answer that.
So what is left is going to be what the lots are platted. So then at the time of the building permits that are coming in, it'll be like any other lot that's coming in now. We'll have to get a tree permit and do any mitigation from there. So that'll be on a lot by lot basis now.
okay, thanks. I just wanted to clarify that, just in case somebody asked me.
Yes, but
if
if it's unregulated, if it's under 3 inches, they do not need to have a permit, but if it's over 3 inches, they still need to get a tree permit. And if it's over 8 inches, it would require some mitigation, or potentially.
And if I'm not mistaken, Mo, in their plan, they gave some information, I believe, on mitigation, didn't they? And it was actually for the buffering areas.
For the bufferings, that's
On the
correct.
perimeters.
Yes, so the portions that they have removed for the infrastructure itself, they will be mitigating that, and they did add some extra trees within the, some of the recreation areas and for the home sites, yes.
Thank you, Mo. Appreciate that. Don't go too far, Mo, because we're going to start something different tonight. And I want to see if we can get this included on every month's agenda. Doesn't matter to me which one of your charming faces does this. But what we'd like to do is get an indication. I know Wendell alluded to applications coming at us, but anything of consequence that may be going, that you're already aware of, that may be going towards the Board of Adjustments, anything that we would need to turn antenna up to.
Yes, of course, we can do that for you, not a problem.
Anything? You want to tell us anything now?
The Board of Adjustments next week, there is a continuation of a appeal that is happening, and then there will be training for the Board of Adjustments.
Thank you, Should appreciate it. Now you can sit. Thank you so much. All right, we appreciate y'all's work. And then we will move on to other business. Is there anything additional to be brought before the board tonight that members have?
I'd like to, based upon what we've talked about earlier this evening, is come up with a committee to look into the text amendments and working with City Council and Ray Giuseppe with regard to textual amendments to address the concerns we all espoused earlier this evening.
I think that's an excellent idea. In that vein, I want to thank the board for its indulgence as we went through that review committee process and then the information that came at you tonight. What we determined is that we have things to learn from this, right? We have determined with council that we are going to recommend that we look at the established processes in the UDO for project submissions to the city, and that we pursue a text amendment that would bring the planning board into the process earlier so that we can help identify things that may come at us, just like we were just discussing, that to be part of our agenda to talk about things that may be coming down the pike so that we could be involved in those processes sooner. As far as, I'll keep going, I'm sorry. As far as looking at items that are before, either coming or before the city, and the UDO text amendments. This was talked about at last week's alderman's meeting, that alderman staff would be working together to identify things in the UDO I will say one of the things I found interesting, that the planning board was not involved in that conversation whatsoever. So what I would say to each of our members, some of us may have running lists of things that we want to get looked at in the UDO. I would ask you to get those items to our interim manager, Noah Saldo. He is at the alderman's meeting last night. It was determined that he was best to be the point person for that and to work with staff on what was appropriate, the text amendments that could be drawn up. So we can also, as citizens and as a board, submit our own text amendments that we'd like to see done. And Mo, I want to ask your opinion. Is it better for us to do it as individual citizens or members, or should we form a committee to look at it, to kind of hash through things? We don't want to be duplicative, but so that we're presenting, for lack of a better term, a united front in this, like Kevin's been alluding to, that we could go in that direction for the board.
Yes, and I want you to know that I will definitely include the planning board. That was not going to be removed
Thank you so
from
much.
the discussion. There are a lot of different things, and I know that everyone has a lot of ideas. There's a lot coming through. I'm hoping that we can also use a lot of the recommendations from the comprehensive plan that we've been working on diligently. It's gone to the Division of Coastal Management. It's going to go next week, hopefully, for their start of their review. So we're still reviewing that publicly, but it's hopefully moving towards adoption.
I'm glad that you said that, because hearing that in the alderman's meeting last week, it made my mind go back to last fall, where there was a lot of discussion about not doing anything until the comp plan was done, so that we would know what direction that we needed to go in different areas. So I appreciate you bringing that up. I think that makes sense, that we're taking action on what we say we want to be happening in the city, instead of kind of willy-nilly pulling items. I would also mention, I know when Travis Henley was here, the two of you were already compiling a list of things that we needed to look at, and I don't want that to go unnoticed or recognized in all of this, that those things were being listed basically to check what came from the comp plan, so that those things could also be incorporated into changes. So we want to give due recognition for that. And I know you have the list now, don't you?
I have all the lists. And however you would like to address it. If you wanted to we could put this on the agenda for just a discussion item, so everyone has an opportunity to speak together. We could compile a list that way if you would like. Either way, or you can send them to me and I can compile them and we can have a discussion. However you choose, that would be fine.
What's the board's pleasure in doing this? Do we want to have this discussion in meetings, light of day kind of thing? We don't want anybody to think we're hiding anything. Is that what you want to do, or do you want to have a work committee? It's kind of restrictive, I think, doing that.
I'm new to the board, and this is the first full meeting. I don't really want to be in a position to have to approve what I think everybody on the board agrees is a patently bad idea. So any way that we can get in front of the UDO, instead of having it, held over our heads later, I'm willing to serve on a committee, or work with Mo or any part of the board that you deem fit. It just seems to be in our interest in the long run to be involved in at least the part of the UDO that we're going to be responsible for approving.
Yeah, Madam Chairman, the reason I suggested the committee is because when you have a finite committee, say you have 3 members, then you can have deadlines, so something gets done expeditiously, and it doesn't just, you're not relying on people individually to get in touch with Mo or have the time, but if you have 3 people that you believe are capable to do that, that focus on it over between now and the next meeting, and then come up with recommendations, and also at that time talk about potential amendments. It's just, I just like to see the car being steered to a destination, if that makes any sense.
It absolutely does. Is everyone in agreement that we can have a work committee on this? Yes. And who's going to raise their hands to be on this work committee? Look at y'all. I love this. Oh, my goodness. We can have 3, Mo. Is that right? Okay, who raised their hands? Kevin did. Look at that. Larry, your inquisitive mind, and John. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate you doing that.
Madam Chair, if I could, on that same idea, and I don't know if this is the appropriate time, last week at the Alderman's meeting, the mayor mentioned that there were things that he thought were in the pipeline that weren't happening. Should we be doing some kind of a joint meeting with the Alderman and the mayor to make sure we're heading in the right direction? Or is this just do the committees first and then have the Alderman pass on what they're thinking of?
Committee members? First question for you. What would you rather see?
I think that the committee works then in conjunction with our liaison to let them know what's going on, the direction we're heading, and be respectful of his position and the importance he has to our board. And I think that's the first avenue, and then ask for recommendations from Frank as to what he would recommend being a knowledgeable member of the Board of Aldermen.
So this would also be an opportunity for the other planning board members to submit any concerns or ideas to the review instead of bringing it up at the 11th hour when we have the whole planning board session. But all of this stuff could be discussed further at the full planning board meeting, but that's it.
I think that's an excellent thing. I was not going to let that go by to give everybody their charge, to get your suggestions, your concerns to these review members so that they can begin looking at the applicable portion of the UDO so that we can see what we need to do. Thank you, Fred, for doing that.
Madam Chair, if I could, one more thing.
Yes, sir.
When we're doing this, is there any way that we can also take a look at the processes? Mo shouldn't have to go through what she went through at Bullfrog Corner with all the iterations and the multiple copies, the hours upon hours of work that she did phenomenally. But is there some way that we can streamline her process as well when we give her some thought to something? So we're not putting more work on it, but actually making sure that it makes sense what we're doing and making it maybe easier, I guess.
And I can see that process is laid out in the UDO. So absolutely that would be part of what could be worked on in this committee. I dare say she'd appreciate having things get a little more streamlined maybe, or being able to hand off, right? Yes, ma'am.
Just for procedures, if the board wants to send staff the comments, if we could just, each of you send them to Wendell or myself, or CC both of us, so that it doesn't become an open meeting, because if you're all in one large email, that chain that keeps going back and forth, it's part of the open law. Okay.
So for now, board members should send their ideas to the review committee. They can come up with a committee chair of their own that would communicate ideas on up to staff.
That's fine.
Is that making sense? Good flow there? All right, folks, so we can get busy with those suggestions. Please put those forward to your committee members then. And then, something else that we've talked about that I'd like to start doing at every meeting involves Mr. Lay, our liaison. Is there anything, I'd like to have a time to incorporate liaison comments in our meetings. Frank, if there's anything that you would want to bring forward to us that's coming out of aldermen's meetings, things that you would suggest that we also start looking at, or things that you think we should start discussing? You can stop at this first mic, it'll be okay.
Thank you. I feel like I'm at home.
Pull up a chair with us.
Yeah, why not? Some of the things you said tonight make a lot of sense, particularly the interface between this board and you guys are working on something, and somebody doesn't like the progress, somebody doesn't like what you might be doing, and then zip around the corner and go to the Board of Adjustment and get a ruling or whatever, and there's no communications going back and forth, so you could be going, counterproductively here. That's got to streamline that process. And you and I talked about that in the past. So
yes, sir.
In my opinion, that's necessary. I know you can do it, but does it make sense to do it? So I think that is absolutely critical. So, I think that your idea of, just kind of bringing everything together, and, I'm sitting over there listening, and that's all I do, but I make my notes. But what you said tonight makes a great deal of sense, and I think you need to go forward with that.
All right. Thank you, Frank. Appreciate it. We'll be asking for your comments at every meeting now, so you be prepared. Okay. We don't want to leave you out. We want you to have an assignment. Thank you so much, Frank, for your work with us and on the Board of Aldermen. All right, we remain in other business. I want to just give a quick General Assembly update. Senate Bill 27 is sorta corresponding to House Bill 24, but the Senate version is more restrictive to certain counties. It applies only, and this is the bills that would give down zoning permission back to municipalities. The Senate bill applies only to far northeastern counties, Bertie, Camden, Currituck, Dare, Gates, Hertford, Northampton, Pasquotank, Perquimans, and Terrell counties, and the municipalities located therein. It was filed on January 30th and now resides in the Senate Rules Committee. House Bill 24, filed the same day, is our preferred version of these bills. It's the blanket restoration of municipalities' authority to initiate downzoning. Its path, it's been re-referred to the Committee on Judiciary, number 3, if favorable. There, it's going to go to Housing and Development. If favorable there, it will go back to the Rules, Calendar, and Operations Committee of the House. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there's a city resolution in support of House Bill 24 that's being delivered to Raleigh next week. Frank, is that correct? For the city. And then one other thing I'd tell you, when we get frustrated with legislative or even local actions that seem detrimental to our city, let me give you some hope that some people do get it right and work for the right. Last week in Wake County, Superior Court Judge Bill Pittman found in the favor of the Coastal Resources Commission in its suit against the Rules Review Commission for removing 30 of the Coastal Resources Commission's rules, giving them protective authority over coastal matters, including enforcement of CAMA development permits, variance request, and designation of certain regions as areas of environmental concern. You see, there is still the good, those that see through and do the right thing for the whole. I'm proud to call Judge Pittman a former colleague and a friend. He's one of the good guys. Announcements is our item K. Anyone? I'll wish us well again and continue to ask you to say prayers for our neighbors to the west. The newest round of flooding and the winter blast in western North Carolina, Tennessee, and Kentucky are taking an all-new toll on those folks. And now, with no other business, gentlemen, can I get a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Will, and a second from Larry. We appreciate that. Motion on the floor. Any final discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen, for your attendance. The meeting is adjourned at 8:11. Stay warm and good night. Thank you so much.